All right, so we're bringing in Alex Scott today. Again, the goal of these videos is to be informational and hopefully very helpful for young junior golfers, parents. And I think there will be some value in this even to the average recreational golfer just looking to get better. But the goal is to interview some great players, coaches, guys that have done it successfully at the collegiate level and even into the professional level. And welcome in Alex Scott. So I'll introduce you a little bit here, man. So Alex is from Traverse City, Michigan. Grew up as a multi-sport athlete, really good basketball player, first team All State, correct? And not only that, but a great golfer, obviously, and then went on to play at Grand Valley State University. And a little bit of a rough start at Grand Valley, I think, your first year. But that's freshman all the time. We don't get the hang of it right out of the gate. But then come your junior year, all of a sudden, by the time, well, when you leave, you're a two-time All-American. You played on the Palmer Cup team, which is one of my coolest memories ever, being down on that really crappy house in Tampa, and then turning on Golf Channel and seeing your name on there, getting named to the Palmer Cup. Took 10th at the U.S. Amateur at Pebble Beach in 2018 in stroke play. Lost to, at the time, the number one ranked player on GolfStat on the final hole. I played at Pepperdine. Took second at the Patriot All America Cup, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you beat Max Homa and Colin Morikawa there, correct?
Homa wasn't there. I'm not sure if Morikawa was. I mean, there's a lot of good players there. I mean, there's a lot of guys who played at big schools. So, yeah,
Yeah, well,
a
you
lot
can't
of,
get into the Patriot All America Cup unless you're really good. So,
yeah, yeah.
and then I think one of your coolest events ever was being the first amateur to ever win the Tournament of Champions, a professional event in Michigan, shooting 61 in the final round. How much were you down going into that final round?
8. Yeah,
8.
was down 8.
Okay.
Got the big check of $750. That was cool.
Because you were an AM.
Holding holding that up there. Yeah, they had to erase it and put that up there. Asking about like how does this work, and they were like, we don't know because this hasn't happened yet. So, but
Yeah,
yeah,
so my from my end of the perspective on that was a pretty cool story, and I think you've heard it before, but I think it's cool to tell. So, our boy Phil Sayers, who we
oh
both
gosh,
love. So I wasn't
yeah,
playing it at that year. I was sitting in the office the morning of the final round, and Phil Sayers walks in my door, and he says, "Does our boy have a chance today?" And Phil can, tell you this as well. I said, and I quote, I go, "No, he'd have to shoot like 61 to have a chance today." So 9 holes in, I think you shoot 29 or 30 on the front nine. I get a text, "It's
yeah,
happening."
30. Yeah.
So anyway, Alex, then you
I
graduate
was playing with
from,
work that day too.
oh yeah, our boy
Yeah,
Workmeister. What a guy.
yeah,
So you graduate from Grand Valley, and then you go on play PGA Tour Canada, PGA Tour LA. Eventually get status on Korn Ferry Tour. You've battled some injuries, and now working your way back, and just shot 11 under at first stage of Korn Ferry slash PGA Tour Q School, and you got second stage coming up. So after that long intro, welcome in Alex. All right.
thank you, thank you.
So, Alex, we do want to keep this somewhat short, right? Just
Yep,
I don't want an hour and a half long podcast here, so I want people to stay engaged and pay attention. So let's talk about recruiting, okay? Because that's a lot of what I want this to be about. So when you look back on now that you're far removed from it, from the recruiting process, and you look back, obviously I know you loved ended up playing where you were playing, but what are some things that you felt like you did right in the recruiting process, and what are some things that you felt like you could give some advice to younger, guys today of what could you do better to help yourself get to the school you really want to play at?
yeah. So the stuff that I did right was very little. I I would just say like I didn't have any friends who were doing it as well, or people that I was close with. We didn't have kind of people in Traverse City that have done it before, or at least recently. So it was like a lot of finding out on our own. I mean, my dad and I didn't really know what we were doing. We were just like, well, we want to play college golf, so what do we do? Like, what's the avenue, right? Like, I grew up playing basketball. I would play AAU basketball. That's how you get noticed. That's how, you play on the bigger stages. You play against the better players and stuff. So, um, back then, I would say really the thing that I thought I did well was I was persistent. I don't want to say annoying, but I was persistent. I tried to keep my name in front of certain coaches, especially in the state. It was no secret that I was like a massive Michigan State fan growing up. That's where I wanted to go. That was my goal. I wanted to go to Michigan State. So I was constantly talking to Coach Luban at the time, even if he probably didn't want to, but sending him emails, sending him updates. So I thought I was keeping the coaches that were interested. I thought I was keeping them updated, putting the right things in front of them. I also, to me, I was I was good, but I wasn't what I would call like a top-fledged player even in the state. I thought going back, looking at it now, removing my own bias from it and stuff, that there was quite a few players in the state that I thought strictly shooting, results, golf scores were better than me. But I really hammered home that like I had a lot of potential. I was a good athlete. I grew up playing a lot of other sports. I didn't really focus on golf much until I was into high school when I started to get lessons and started to, actually practice that sort of thing. So I thought obviously, depending on where you go, a lot of big colleges are getting, polished players at the age of 17 or 18, right? I was
Hmm.
totally not that. But being able to hopefully show I mean, I thought my biggest advantage was my athleticism, like showing like, hey, like I am this good of a basketball player. Imagine how good I could be as a golfer, kind of thing. And I think that helped keep some conversations going. But really, other than that, I thought there was, now looking back, there's a lot of things I would have done differently. To me, again, it is costly, so it may not be for everybody. But I think the AJJ circuit is really important. I feel like a lot of coaches, that's probably the first thing they look to. I'm not a college coach myself, obviously, but it's the easiest way to really match yourself up against good players. I mean, even the
Hmm.
ones in the state of Michigan. I mean, you see people traveling from all over the country to go play in them. And I would say those are actually probably uh, lower tiered, I guess. Maybe they're like they wouldn't have maybe as strong as strength of field as other events in AJJ would. But even then, if you go post good finishes in those, that is super attractive for college coaches, obviously. And that is also where a lot of college coaches go to recruit. They will go to AJJ events, versus, they're not going to go to your high school match in the middle of nowhere in the state of Michigan, I mean, unless you're really the real deal. So, um, I think that's probably the best way to at least allow for coaches to see you. But then on the opposite end as well, a lot of it is about really sending a lot of emails and letters to everybody, anybody who will listen, because you don't know who you're going to impress. Maybe your scores and your level athletic ability, I don't know. Maybe that says mid-major D1. I have no idea. But all of a sudden, if you're able to put the right impression on the right coach, who's maybe a power five or four now, whatever, one of the maybe a bigger school that might be slightly out of your reach, but maybe you put a good impression on that coach. Maybe they think, man, this is something I can work with, right? I can work with this player, whether it's their potential or it's their work ethic or whatever it may be. So I think that's part of it, is to not be, it's not so much afraid, but to not be scared of putting letters out to anybody and everybody. There is, when you're young, you're watching TV. Like I said, I was a Michigan State fan, but across the country, everybody's growing up as fans of normally big schools. The Texases, the Oklahomas, the Indianas, Penn States, all that sort of stuff, and that's kind of where you always envision yourself going. But that doesn't work out for everybody. There are only so many roster spots. You can only be so, the timing of how good you are can only happen up to when you're 18, when you decide when you have to go to college. So putting it out there, Division 3, Division 2, NAIA, mid majors, power fives, whatever, getting your name out there, putting it in front of coaches is the best way to make sure that you have offers. The best problem you can have is having too many offers. You don't want to just have one or two that even you don't even know, oh, I didn't really like this campus, or this coach maybe rubbed me the wrong way. Well, if you have seven offers, whether it's a Division 3, Division 2, or a mid major, you have more options. So that was what I would have done differently. I would have gotten to AJJs earlier, and I would have sent out more letters uh, to more coaches.
Yeah, and I think we can, you touched on Michigan State, and if you grew up in the state of Michigan, most people are either a Michigan or a Michigan State fan, and they drink that Kool-Aid pretty hard, right?
Yep.
And I think we could say maybe a mistake that you did make was putting all your eggs in one basket, right? Of like, I
Yeah,
want to go to Michigan State so bad, and the reality is Coach Luban can only take 1 to 3 guys per year, right? It's a pretty competitive deal, and sometimes it's the timing, right? Like if you would have been a year older or a year younger in a different class, who knows? It may have
senior
worked out.
class or whatever. Yep.
Yeah, so there's just I think putting all your eggs into one basket is a big mistake. You can have the primary place that like this is where I really want to go, but like you said, let's expand our options and don't be too proud to go play at a D2 or a D3 or an NAIA, like at the end of the day, and you know this, and I will say this repeatedly with every guest that I have on here, you have to go where you're going to play.
100%. That's so there's actually two sides for me with that one because I still get reached out to some high school players reach out to me and stuff asking for advice and everything. And that's the first thing that I say is I'm like, you have to go somewhere where you can play because it does you no good to go and practice. Who cares? You can go practice
Hmm.
anywhere. Like, sure, this nice school might have nicer facilities or whatever, but like the facilities, they matter, but the best still figure it out. It doesn't matter the facilities so much. The best practice is playing. As long as you have a golf course, you can figure it out. Like you can, if you got to be out there early in the morning, be the first tee time out or be the last people out there so you can hit some extra wedge shots, whatever it is, you can figure it out. So the thing to me, and this is the biggest change now from when I was in college to now kids who are in college is the transfer portal. I mean, it is a thing where let's say you want to go to, so just because we brought it up, let's say I really want to go to Michigan State. I am so set on Michigan State. I want to play there so bad, but I'm not good enough when you first graduate. Okay, well, you're never going to get there if you don't play. You will never have a chance at that roster if you don't play. But if you go to whatever, Division 3, Division 2, mid major, whatever it may be, if you go to a college that I guess let's say is considered less than. I don't necessarily use that around, but let's say you're getting recruited by a school. You go there and you go there as a freshman, and all of a sudden you break out and you play really well, and because you're playing on 7,000 plus yard golf courses and whatever conditions and stuff. You post a good scoring average, then you answer the transfer portal. Oh, hey, wow, this guy went and proved himself. I was wrong. I'll take him on my roster. That's to me, it's still wild for me to say that because it's so opposite of what I thought back then when I was in college, but the rules are different now. I mean, it's more of it's like putting feelers out there, like, oh, who would take me now kind of thing. And you know, you can have your own opinions. I'm not going to say anybody is right or wrong as to, I'm someone who's more in the corner of like if you go to a college, I would like to see people stick it out there, because I think choosing where you go to college is more important than the golf itself, personally. Like,
Hmm.
I think there's more to it than that. Like, just from my own experiences, like going to Grand Valley, um, I became so immersed like in the athletic community. I enjoyed going to other people's sporting events. I met so many people and had so much fun. I don't look at it any differently. I'm like, yeah, I had the greatest college experience ever. And a lot of people ask me all the time, like, well, why didn't you try to transfer this and that? And it's like, I was getting better and I loved where I was. Like, there isn't really for me back then, there was no PGA Tour U. The transfer portal wasn't a thing. So, like, there was no benefit to transferring. Now, if you're someone who professional golf is in your sight, you know that's what you're going to do, then okay. If you can go to a college where, you can get your full 2 years done, or junior, senior year of racking up PGA Tour U points and try to get status on a tour once you graduate, I respect that. That's different. You got to do what you got to do. But to me, in terms of if there's a place you really want to play and you're not good enough to be there yet, you got to go to a place where you can play. That's the only avenue that you can end up getting there. Because if you go somewhere where you're not going to play, then uh, y- one, you're not going to get better. But even if you do get better, you're never going to be able to prove it. You're never going to be able to show that you got better. So you
Right.
definitely have to go to a place that you're going to be traveling, you're going to be playing in the events, you're going to be in the heat, you're going to be playing qualifying. Yeah, yeah, that's how you really, that's how you grind your teeth. So
Well, and I think like another thing that can happen there, and it would be like, let's say the transfer portal did exist in your era. I
yeah,
still believe, and this is a pretty cool thing as well. I think the way it would have worked out is you may have came to Grand Valley thinking, okay, I'm going to ball out at Grand Valley, do some big things, and then transfer to Michigan State. But my
yeah,
bet would be after the rate that you got better and the experience that you were having, you would have ended up just going, you know what, things are pretty good here. Because the other thing is, it's a risk to leave a place you're getting better, right?
yeah,
Like, so
yeah,
if you continue
100%.
to do this, why would you leave? Because now you're risking the chance of flatlining somewhere else, which brings me to my next question. So, one thing that I think is so incredible about you, you might have, I mean, you got one of the bigger scoring average drops in college that I personally have ever seen. So, your freshman year, playing for myself at Grand Valley State, you averaged 77.5, which is quite bad for a collegiate golfer.
Pretty good. So
And I will never forget this. I don't know if you remember it, but I tell this story all the time. We played at TPC, Michigan, which is a
it's I
horrific
didn't
golf course.
I
It's
didn't
a
want
hor-
you to say it. I did not want you to bring it up.
it's a terrible golf course. I don't like it. I probably shouldn't say that, but I just don't. Um, and you shot, I don't even remember, 84-80 or something like that. It was only a two-round
I
event.
think I posted an 86. I think I shot 86-80.
Okay, even
Yeah.
worse. Good, good.
Yeah, yeah, it
So
was it was real bad, yeah.
you came into my office a couple days later and asked me, what's it going to take for me to play on the PGA Tour? Which I thought, number one, okay, this is a pretty relentless confidence this kid has, which is very special. But number two, like you just shot 86-80. What the hell are we talking about the PGA Tour for? Let's start bringing this down a little bit. And
Let's
the
shoot in the
conversation we
70s, my
had.
man.
Yeah, well, I mean, I love where your head was at, but so, the conversation we had was getting it more into first, let's focus on just being a good player here, right? And then become an all conference player, become an all region player, become an all American player, and start to kind of formulate that into small steps first to get to the ultimate big goal. And then lo and behold, your junior year, you averaged 70 and are a first team All American. 26 of your 30 rounds, competitive rounds that year, were even par or better. Your highest score was a 75. So what's that?
I know where it was. Yeah.
Yeah, quick story on that, because I remember that was like the only time in my life I've been mad at someone for playing bad. Because 2 days before the first round at that event, you shot 64 at the Meadows, which is a difficult golf course,
Yeah.
tied the course record. And then in the practice round the next day for that event, you shot 64. And then you shot 75 in the opening round. And I'm like, what the hell, man? 64, 65. We
Yeah.
call it a tournament. You
Yeah.
shoot 75. But yeah, so long story short, and then that summer was when you took 10th at the US Amateur, like that winter, you took second at the Patriot All America. That's when things really started to explode for you,
Yeah.
right? So I use you as an example a lot to current players of, it's not that you didn't have talent, it's not that you didn't have athleticism, you just were having a hard time putting it together. And some of it was because you wanted it so bad, right? And you would
Oh
just
yeah.
stress yourself out. And then once we started compartmentalizing and saying, let's just get a little better at this today, let's get a little better at this today, everyone wants improvement to look like this, but it really looks like this, right? You just
Yeah.
beat your head against a wall for a long time, and then you have these big breakthroughs, which you had. So, your first freshman year was not very good. The fall of your sophomore year was not very good. And then from
Yeah, and the spring was
spring of your
pretty good.
sophomore year on, you never finished outside the top 10 in an event, including the national championship, right? Which was just remarkable consistency. So, in your own words, kind of talk to us, about that experience of going from, I mean, a 7.5 shot scoring average improvement is not something you see every day. So, what do you think allowed you to get there?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things. My freshman year, I was also like sick and not prioritizing sleep very well. I was enjoying college. But yeah, a lot of it was I am always fighting against my instincts. I'm always a very result-based person. And that's how I have been my whole life. Win, lose, qualify, not qualify, s- under par, over par, whatever. And that has it's driven me well to a point where I see the goal, I want to get the goal, I'm going to do what I can to get there. But at the same time, it has also worked against me because there's times where when I'm not seeing the results the way I want to see them, then I'm kind of like, oh, well, I'm losing it. This is happening. What's going on? And I can start to kind of either get low in confidence or get frustrated or both. And so to your point, I mean, you already alluded to it, but when I become more process oriented, when I am only focusing on getting better, like, okay, without really a result in mind, like, yeah, okay, I know I haven't been putting well, so I'm going to spend X amount of hours today on making my putter better. It doesn't necessarily happen in that day. Like, it doesn't mean that, oh, yeah, I started practicing at 10 a.m. and now by noon, I'm a better putter. You don't
Right.
see it right that. You don't see it like that, but when you're able to properly identify what the issue is, and I think that was part of it for me, is kind of like, yeah, well, I hit it bad. Okay, well, how'd you hit it bad? Well, what do you mean I hit it bad? It's like, okay, well,
Hmm.
that doesn't, then you can't identify anything. Oh, yeah, I was missing left more often than right. Or, yeah, I kept shoving my putts. Or, I kept missing everything on the high side. Like, for me, that's when I was able to look at, okay, I'm seeing consistent issues here. Now I'm able to work on those things. And again, it doesn't show like, oh yeah, I went from 73 to 72 scoring average. It's just I see it in my practice. I feel it. You feel it. You gain confidence. Um, when the physical gets better, your mental gets better. When your mental gets better, your physical gets better, and so on and so forth. So, but I think where the big jump was really, which this is a good answer and a bad answer, is that there wasn't anything there was no secret. There was no, oh yeah, I changed golf balls and I was way better, or I did this, I really bowed my wrist and I got way better. No, like it wasn't anything like that. I didn't make any drastic changes to what I was doing. I I put in the work, I put in the time. It took a while. Well, I mean, it depends on it's all relative. It took a while to see it, but then once it started to happen and I started to see the results, I was feeding off that. And then really where kind of like kicking the door down was like winning. I never, for a while, I was a consistent finisher, but I wasn't winning. I wasn't kind of shooting the low scores. I actually didn't really shoot that many low scores in college, but I was always close. I was finishing fifth, I was finishing seventh, but I wasn't winning. So then I won the GAM championship in 2017, and I won by a lot. I won by like seven, and I was
Hmm.
so talk about being in the zone. I don't even like. I don't think I talked to anybody. I was so I was so locked in that, and again, it was all a product of everything, all of the work that I did. It was no secret. It was all the work that I did, and finally it happened. And I allowed it to happen. I think that is the hardest part, is allowing your success to come through. Because if you do, a lot of people don't put in the time. A lot of people don't put in enough work, quality and quantity, where they're like, well, I don't know why I'm not getting better. It's like, well, what do you mean? You're not doing enough to get better. For
Hmm.
me, I was doing enough to get better. And then I was putting the pressure on myself to perform when really I just had to go out and play golf. It's not that simple. Obviously, there's always a want to do well. There's always some internal pressure on yourself to perform. But finally, when I was able to kind of get out of my own way and I put up a performance like that and I win by 7 against a lot of good players in the state, it was like, whoa, what just happened? Like, I
Yeah.
want to do that again. So then from there, that really kind of propelled me forward going into my junior year where it became a standard at that point. I I'm not really shy in saying I thought I was the best player in the conference, also the region at that point. And I showed up to every event expecting like I'm gonna get everybody's best. Like when I get paired with people, they're gonna know that they're playing with me and they're gonna want to try to beat me. And it didn't happen very often. It did, but I was able to hold myself to that without letting it break me down at the same time. I was able to hold myself to a high standard, but still go out and be able to perform, not get in my own way of, a couple bad shots or a bad 6 hole stretch or whatever. I was much better at being able to let it roll off the shoulder and move on, next shot, next hole. Okay, I had a bad day, tomorrow will be better, whatever. So I never allowed myself to stay slumped long. I remember it was my junior year. I lost in a playoff for the conference championship for the second time. And I was so mad. I don't think I talked in the van ride home. And we won the conference championship. I don't, but I was so mad because I had a bad finish in regulation and I lost in the playoff. So we had 2 weeks until supers and I remember I grinded like no other. I mean, I was already grinding, and I said like, man, I am not gonna let that put me down. And I went and won supers by I think like 5 shots. And
Yeah.
I've
So
never
we at
allowed
the
myself to stay down long.
yeah, I remember that. And to put in context for maybe it's I don't even know if it's called that. It's regionals, right? So
Oh,
that everyone kind of knows what we're talking about. It's regionals. So yeah,
sorry, yeah,
yeah, you won regionals by a lot that year, and then you and I get to go to Alabama and played
yeah,
pretty well. Took fifth in nationals as well. So two more quick things I want to touch on. I just want to reiterate something you said that I thought was fantastic. It was about putting in the work and being as prepared as I could be, but then not putting the pressure on myself going into an event, right? I think that's really important. Like, I'm a big Michael Jordan fan, Tiger Woods fan. Like, I just love the greats, right? And Jordan always talked about, not really being that nervous for games because he knew he was the most prepared, right? So
yep.
if I know I've done everything I can do to prepare for this moment, then what is there to be worried about, right? Just go out and play, and wherever the cards fall, that's where they fall.
And I think the big thing, I think a stark difference, at least in my opinion, from like basketball to golf is like you can put in the work, you can put in the hours, and it can be quality. Like I'm I'm I am quite sure Tiger had this at some point, not that he's ever really vocalized it, but I'm sure he had a week or 2 weeks, he would take 2 or 3 weeks of prep of no tournament play going into majors, where I'm sure that he probably struggled during that 2, 3 week stretch of getting ready, where he didn't have the ball on a frozen rope. Maybe he wasn't making all of his short putts all the time. But he was still able to, once he got on the first tee, he was like, I did all I could to be ready for right now, regardless of how it went. It doesn't mean your practice has to be perfect. Yes, it's a lot easier if it is. It's really easy to be confident in a tournament when the week prior I'm hitting all my shots, all my windows, I'm making a lot of putts, and I'm easily shooting 5, 6 under every practice round I play. Yeah, okay, it's easy to be confident, duh. But like on the weeks that it doesn't all come together, because everybody knows golf is weird. It can ebb and flow. You can be using the same drills that you always use that gets you ready. You can be working on the same things that gets your swing in the right spot, and it just might not be working at that particular moment, for that week, or for that 2 weeks that you're preparing. But as long as you know that you did what you could to be ready, that always it makes it a lot easier to allow it to happen. There's a lot of things that if I mean, no human's perfect. If you didn't put in the time that you know that you probably should have to be ready, you know it and you feel it
Hmm.
when it comes to it, because you're like, because when you maybe get off to that bad stretch, all of a sudden you're like, oh boy, I don't know if I can get out of this. When
Yeah.
really it's like, if you know you did all the work you could and you have a bad opening tee shot, or you bogey your first hole, or you're 2 over through 9, you say, well, okay, that was rough, but I can get it back. And
Hmm.
that's just from the time, that's from the time and the quality. Like I know a lot of people that put in the quantity who don't put in the quality. They just go on the range and hit balls. Okay, well, what are you working on?
Right.
Is there a goal? Is there something? Is there a feel that you're trying to achieve? Is there a position you're trying to hit? Like whatever are you trying to hit start right draws or whatever? So the there's no question that, and I think like another one to me is like when I think of is like Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady. When you hear interviews about them, right? How so prepared and dialed they were. Peyton Manning, all the defenses, like they knew what was going to happen before the balls even snapped. So I would be fair to say, I don't think Peyton Manning's probably the most athletic quarterback ever to play, but he's a top three, five, he's top five
Yeah.
at worst quarterback ever, and he couldn't run out of his own shadow. So like the the preparation is the biggest thing, and golf is by far the hardest sport to allow it to happen, because in basketball you have a team. Okay, well, my 3-point shot is off, but I can still affect the game in a different way. I can still play good defense. I can still distribute the ball. I you know I'm the if I'm the primary ball handler, I can make sure I'm not turning it over, whatever. But in golf, it is all on you. That's why it's like the best sport. I mean, you are the man in the
Yeah.
arena. When it comes down to it, all eyes are on you, and you're the only one that's going to remember whether you pulled it off or if you failed. And so that's the hardest part about not about letting it roll off your shoulder. The best players in the pro game, I'll cap it real quick. The best players in the pro game, man, all it is body language. You know when they're confident versus when they're not. I said this last year when I was on Korn Ferry tour. I was really struggling with my game, which was really funny or weird to look at. I was at the highest point in my pro career in my status, but I felt the lowest in my confidence. Make that make sense. But I played 4 rounds with Chris Goddard, who's now a PJ Tour winner, and he played 4 years at Rutgers, 1 year at Oklahoma. And I told people, I said, if you never videoed a single shot, sure, he is a physical freak. He can swing it above 130 club head speed with the driver. He hits it crazy far. He can stop an iron on a concrete slab. But if you just didn't video a single shot, video a single putt, and you just videoed our body language, you would have known he's better than me,
Hmm.
because I was walking around wondering if I belong. Meanwhile, he was walking around thinking like, even if he was struggling that week, he was just kind of like, I'll just get it next week, or next hole. He hits a bad shot. I'll just get it up and down. Like obviously he's not saying these things, but like you can see it. You can see that
Hmm.
hits a bad shot. He internalizes it for a little bit. He doesn't get real mad, but he internalizes it like, like he might drop a curse word or something like that, get something out, and then he's just back to it. He's just okay, whatever. I'll go, hit a good chip, get up and down, or I hit a bad wedge, but I'll still get a good run at the putt or whatever. And we'd finish up rounds, and I'm like, oh wow, he shot 3 under, and it really didn't look good. And then he would shoot like 7 under, and I'm like, oh yeah, right. Well, that's when he's playing good. So those things, those are the best. Every single best player I've ever been around, I don't know, it's not delusion, but they're just so confident that it will come back. They can be struggling, but they're like, it'll come back. I'm like, yeah, it's whatever. Had a bad day. I'll play better tomorrow. And that's how the best are in every sport, but especially in golf.
Yeah, and we do see that across the board. I mean, with great players, right? The old adage, and it's so true. And you have to get to that higher level to really understand it. Of like, you can look at a phenomenal player, and when you walk up, you're not going to know if they're six under or six over, right? Their body
Yep.
language is going to be consistent. They're always going to have that confidence that they can come back. Like I use Brad Stevens as an example, because who's the GM of the Celtics now, was the head coach and the head coach at Butler, and that was one of his big things, like that he talks about over and over, is next play mentality, right? Like if you throw a bad pass and turn the ball over, like I don't want to see your head go down or you slap your hands. Like just get back on defense, right? The
Yeah. Yeah.
turnover already happened. There's nothing you can do about it now. So just get your ass back on defense and influence the game the best that you can.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's the hardest thing. Obviously, especially if you're in pro golf, I mean, you expect a lot of yourself, and it's not really an entirely rewarding sport. I say this to a lot of people. Like, I mean, I can be on a 460-yard par four. I can hit a drive in the center of the fairway, and I can go, well, I'm supposed to do that. So
Hmm.
then I grab my 7-iron, and I hit a statistically great shot to 20 feet from 180 yards or whatever it would be. Okay, yeah, I'm supposed to do that. I'm supposed to hit the green. And then I roll this putt end over end, perfect starting line, and I just burn the edge, and I tap in for par.
Yep.
Okay, well, I was just supposed to do all that. But then the next hole, I hit a little flare into the right rough. God dang it.
Right.
Okay,
Then you're
let's.
mad.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
so it's 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 not super rewarding. So like you kind of have to make it feel that way. Like it's not so much about being positive. Like you don't got to walk around being smiley all the time, but like you have to kind of curb it in your advantage of like I don't want to say like celebrating the little wins, but like yeah, I mean if you crush a drive right down the center or whatever, be like okay, like here we go. I'm in a good spot for birdie. And then even if you don't hit a great shot, like I flared it a little onto the right side of the green, so maybe it's not a good look for birdie, but okay, I'm going to make an easy par. Like there's it's trying to look at the slightly more positive than the slightly negative part of whatever comes out of each shot that you hit. And I think that's what those guys do. They don't sulk on the oh, I just hit it in the water. They don't think, boy, I'm probably about to make double. Statistically, you might be, but oh no, I'm going to do what I can to make bogey or save par or whatever it is. And so I think and that's the hardest part. Again, way easier if you prepare better. Way easier if you're well prepared for a tournament that when that bad shot happens or that bad stretch comes that you can recover from it versus if you haven't quite done everything you need to do to be ready for whatever event you're playing in, you know, it's a lot easier to let the negative get more negative.
Yeah, so like another thing we talk about this all the time with our team is like manifesting momentum, right? So like understanding how to take the positive away so that you don't get too down on yourself. Like an example that I've seen time and time again is guy hits maybe a bad approach shot, right? And maybe it was an easy approach shot. He had gap wedge in the middle of the fairway and
Yeah.
somehow missed the green, right? Which is less than ideal, but it can happen. And then they've
Oh
got a
yeah.
tough up and down, and they get the tough up and down, and then they're upset still about the bad wedge shot. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, wait a minute. You're missing an opportunity to take momentum here, right? Like you're choosing to
Yep.
give momentum back by saying, "Well, I hit a crappy wedge shot there, so I'm going to carry that in the next hole." It's like, no, you just made a great par, right? The wedge
Yeah.
happened two shots ago. Like you had an awesome chip and a great putt to get up and
Yep.
down. Like look at it like you're invincible. I was able to hit this
Yeah.
horrible shot and still make par, right? So like being
Yeah.
able to
And
stay positive.
I think the other thing too is like and this is probably one of the best things that I've heard. I feel like it's very hard to kind of let it sink in, but a lot of people try to talk about false confidence, right? Like, well, you kind of have to fake it till you make it. But the other part is there's also a lot of false fear. Like, there's also a lot of stuff that
Yeah.
you put in your head that is just so not relevant. Like, it's so. I mean, and this has happened to every golfer. Nobody's perfect, but how many times has there been, you know, when you're kind of slide in, you might be playing bad, you get in a hole, and there's out of bounds that's like it's just not even in play,
Yeah.
but it sits there. You're kind
Yeah.
of like, oh, like you could stand there if you take the result away, if you just put the bucket of range balls there, 50 balls, you wouldn't even know there's out of bounds there. But when things start to go bad, you look for the bad. You look for it. You start to say like, well, what could go wrong? Which is natural. That's totally human instinct. But the next thing you have to do is be able to take that second. You can't block bad thoughts. If you're trying to not think about bad thoughts, you think about bad thoughts. So like you need to let those happen, even if that out of bounds is 70 yards left. You go, now you take that second and go, like, okay, now what am I gonna do? What am I gonna focus on? Like, okay, I wanna see this fall, I wanna start this at this tree and let it fall a little to the right in the fairway. Then you start to focus on what you want to happen, what should happen versus okay, there's water right and there's out of bounds left and that's a bad angle over there and yeah, you have to take all those things in. People say like, well, don't look at the water.
Yeah, so we call it
So yeah.
replacement, right? So like
Yeah,
I have to acknowledge that there's out of bounds left. I have to acknowledge
100%.
that. And then I have to replace it. I can't think don't hit it out of bounds because then all your brain
Exactly.
thinks about is out of bounds. So I've got my out of bounds on the left. Well, what I'm going to do is take a more conservative line to the right, but then I'm going to lock in on that target, right? So whether
100%. Yeah.
it's a tree in the distance, right, in the right side of the fairway, but now I've taken a conservative line to help me eliminate that out of bounds, and I'm not even thinking about it anymore. I've already
Nope.
adjusted for it, and now I'm focused strictly on my target.
Exactly. And so I think that's kind of that was something that I struggled with for a while because like when I was a little bit low on confidence, all of a sudden I I became aware of my bad thoughts. But instead of just like taking them in and then focusing on the good, I was like, well, why am I thinking about that? What am I doing?
Mhm.
So then it was like getting worse. So I think like being aware of those things, yes, like you have to realize that there's trouble, danger, whatever that can affect your score poorly. But then by allowing yourself to commit to whatever line that you're going for, that only helps build your mental in the sense that like even if you're coming off a bad hole or whatever, okay, well, all I'm gonna do is try to, you know, I feel like now you're probably gonna think this is crazy, but my putting is the best part of my game. I I'm very confident in my putting, and it has showed tournament after tournament. And for the longest time, I think like what the biggest change came to me. Why can't I transfer this into my long game? I don't know why, but when uh when it came to my putting is when I am putting my best, almost all I ever tell myself is, okay, I'm gonna give this the best roll I possibly can.
Yep.
That is all I say. That because
Yep.
then everything else is out of my control. Sure, I can that I'll be able to diagnose like, oh, I played too much break or I hit it too hard or whatever. But I've had a lot of I mean, I've had a lot of important putts to get through a Monday qualifier to, whatever, make a cut, whatever, where the odds are against me, let's say. Like downhill left to right breaker from 11 feet, that's probably a 25% make, maybe 25 to 30%, something like that.
Mhm.
You can look at it the statistic way, but sure, everything is working against you. But for me, it's kind of like, okay, well, all I can do is roll this the best I can, see what happens. And then whenever I tell myself that, I almost never get mad at the result. If I just
Correct.
allow myself to free up and do it, it makes accepting whatever happens. I mean, obviously, if I make it, it's really easy. But even if I miss it, I'm kind of like, oh man, I rolled that really well, and I just missed it. Like, what are you gonna do? You did all you could. So
As you
it's
mentioned, right, it's controllables versus uncontrollables. So,
exactly.
like at the end of the day, if I'm fully committed to the read that I've made and I've determined the pace I want to hit that putt on, right, and now I strike that putt, you've done everything that you can do. And so what
Yeah.
happens after that, it's silly to get mad at, right? Especially
Hmm.
like when we use the perfect putter, right? We've learned, right? The
Yeah.
thing that rolls down, like you can have a 15 footer and you can have it mapped out to the exact speed and the exact line that it needs to be, and putts will still miss, right? Bob
Yeah.
Rotella was huge on this. Like greens are made by humans, which are imperfect creatures, right? So they create an imperfect surface. So getting
Yeah.
mad about every missed putt is psycho.
I mean, when you think about golf, it is an absurd sport. Like when you think about it in like the minute, like you are putting on grass that is growing all day, that is being
Hmm.
stepped on, that can grow different ways, Bermuda, bent, whatever. Um, like the firmness, what is it, is it raining? Has it been bone dry? Like there's so many imperfections. How many times it's so funny, right? When you watch TV, you see a guy hit a 12 footer and just miss it. And then there's a guy, his ball is right in front of it, 10 footer. And the announcers always go, "Oh, well, he's going to make this because he just got the read." I'm like,
Yeah.
I see reads all the time and I still miss putts. How there's times where, I mean, I remember when it happened to me in Q school. I watched a guy, you know, putt breaks across the hole and I'm like, wow, this is going to break quite a bit. And I hit a perfect putt end over and it just stayed out to the left. And I was like,
Yep.
how does that happen? I'm like, I just watched us do that. But when you think about everything that I just said, it's like it is one of the only sport. Yeah, basically is like the only sport where that many things are working against what is actually directly affecting your results, whether it goes in or not or whatever. And so it's I mean, golf is a crazy thing. There is only so much in your control, and that's why it makes it all the more impressive to see guys operate at the highest level. I mean, you would think that Scotty controls everything, right? I mean, he
Yeah.
like distance control king since Tiger. I mean, that guy can be in the worst of conditions. I mean, he can be in thick, rough, right to left wind with a right pin with firm greens, and he hits it pin high almost every time. And it's just like it's so absurdly impressive to see those guys be able to operate and they don't control it all, but they are the best at working through it all for sure.
Well, and one thing I think Scheffler does very well based on video that I saw is, when they had the BMW here in Denver at
Oh
Castle
yeah, yeah.
Pines. So, they're playing at 6,000 feet elevation, makes a big difference. And I watched a video with him and his caddy where they went up and down that golf course they're practicing on. They had the quad with them, right? So they're checking,
Yeah.
trying to learn yardages, but they kept saying over and over, a lot of this is feel, right? Like the
Yeah.
technology is important and it gives me a baseline. But you as a competitive player, myself as a competitive player, we've all hit shots in tournaments where we don't know why we selected the club that we selected and it worked out perfect, right? Like I
At the
can't,
end of the
it's not
day,
always a
it's a
math
game.
equation. Like I've
Yeah.
hit so many shots in tournaments where I'm like, there's no reason for me to think this is a 7 iron, but I think it's a 7 iron. And then boom, it's pin high.
Well, and the thing is so another reason why I think Scotty is the best is that the technology and so like Decade, right? Decade got really popular. It makes people get better faster, which is true. It simplifies the game. It allows, aggressive off the tee, conservative into the greens. It allows you for the best scoring opportunities. But at the end of the day, it still is a game. Like
Hmm.
there are times where, you know, actually, I have a good example about this. So I was in Brazil playing Latin America Tour. There's a par five, terrible par five, by the way. But the tee shot is it's kind of like if you hit driver, it brings water into play. Um, but it also gives you a chance to go for it versus you could hit like a driving iron, 3 iron, whatever, hybrid off the tee to stay short of a bunker that's short of the water to make the layup easier. And I played the first 2 rounds. I just, for whatever reason, couldn't get comfortable on that tee box. Driver just didn't seem to fit. Really didn't want to hit hybrid because it just kind of has a long shot in with the layup. And I was like, I'm going to hit 3 wood. It is statistically the worst club to hit off the tee. Like it brings the most trouble with the least amount of risk. Or sorry, it brings the most risk in play with the least amount of reward. But it felt right, and I striked it right down the
Hmm.
center. And like that's the part of the game that will never be taken away. Like there are like people do try to look at golf as truly a math equation, but it's not. There are certain ways that certain shots, certain things that you have to let your athleticism take over. Like, sure, if the percentage play is hitting driver, but you can't commit to hitting driver, it's not the percentage play. Like
Exactly.
you need to grab the club that sure, don't get me wrong. Let's say when the tournament's done, wow, I really wasn't confident in my driver. I need to work on this. So then
Hmm.
that will be it. But in that moment when the scores matter the most, if I know I can put a good swing on this, and I know I'm going to hit it in the fairway, which even then doesn't always happen, as we know. But if that's what you truly think is going to happen, you can commit to that. That's playing the game. There's a lot of times where people say like, "Well, yeah, it's driver over that bunker," but if you can't commit to it, it ain't the play for you. Like
Right.
you're gonna hit it more, you're gonna hit it poorly more often than these other people. Sure, if those guys all hit driver and they all stripe it and they have 80 yards in and you're hitting 3 wood out to the left and you have 120 yards in, statistically, they're going to beat you on the hole over X amount of rounds. But if you decide to take driver and you hit it in the trees and you got to punch out or hit it out of bounds or whatever it is, they're definitely going to beat you on the hole.
Correct.
Like they're not always going to beat you on the hole if you're in the fairway at 120, but they're always going to beat you on the hole if they're in the fairway at 80 and you're in the trees. So,
Agree, man. That's great stuff. So quickly, what is next for you? You got second stage coming up?
yeah, I'm going to play two G Pro events up in North Carolina, kind of end of this month, beginning of November, and I'll do the RSM pre-qualifier, which is actually one of the harder pre-qualifiers to get through because it's got like 4 sites, so there's only 5 spots available at each site. So I mean, it's practically a Monday to get into the Monday. But yeah, just practice prep. I've been taking it kind of light right now, just more like focusing on my body, like trying to get a little bit more on the healthier side. But yeah, kind of starting. Well, like this week, probably mid this week, I'll really get back nose to the grindstone, start to put the work in, and my second stage will be the first week of December. So I got time. I was actually shocked. Well, this is a good example, I guess. The week, 8 days before my first stage started, I was like, wow, I felt terrible. My game, uh, fairways looked like real narrow. I was hitting it bad. I didn't feel really good about my putting. I was really struggling with my game. Scott Ebert, my swing coach, he had COVID, so he couldn't come work with me in person. So we were kind of FaceTiming. It is weird. I mean, the whole feel isn't real thing. It's such a tough thing, but we're working on my golf swing. We're not really like changing a ton, but at the time it felt like a lot. So I'm kind of hitting it everywhere on the range. I'm like, oh man, this is bad. I got 7 days till first stage, like, and I am just all over the place. And I prepared well within my limits. I still can't quite do as much as I want to do. I got to make sure my body's feeling pretty good. But man, I was very in control at first stage. That was the most in control with my game that I felt in a long time, which is crazy because I haven't played that much. But a lot of things seemed to come together. I was driving it really well. Um, my long irons felt really good again. I made the par threes quite stress free, which is one of the most important things out there. And I was putting really good. It was very nice to see. I haven't felt that confident in my game in a long time. So I mean, if I continue to trend that way, I really like my odds at second stage. So
Good, man. Well, it's no surprise to me that you were able to step up and play well at first stage. So, obviously, I've known you a long time and was fortunate to coach you for 4 years at Grand Valley State. And if there's one thing I know about Alex Scott, the bigger the stage, the better you generally play. And it's like kind of to a ridiculous level.
it is
You're
pretty ridiculous. I wish I would change that a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's pretty amazing, right? It's better to be the way that you are than the other way around. Like, you may not play the way you want to play all the time, no one does, but your ability to bring out your best stuff, or as we define it, competitive greatness, right? Giving your best effort at the time it's most needed. I can honestly say I've never met someone better at that than you, and it's pretty impressive. And obviously, we love you and we wish you the best second stage, man.
Thank you, Coach. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. This was fun. It was nice. I mean, this is good for me too. Like saying all this stuff out loud is always good for me as well, because like it helps me internalize it as well. Because everybody strays from time to time. So, no, thank you for having me. If I hope it helps somebody, anybody. So,
Me too. All right, man. Well, stay healthy, take care of your body, and we'll be looking for you on the PGA Tour soon.
thank you, Coach. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
All right, see you, Alex.
See ya.